Biden spoke on Thursday morning from the White House Rose Garden about the importance of ensuring a peaceful and orderly transition. The Hill called his speech a pathetic post-election pep talk. Now, I would never say that about President Biden, whom I really respect and admire, but I connect with the sentiment they wrote when they said Donald Trump, the man who General Mark Milley called fascist to the core and the most dangerous person to this country, does not deserve to have the blue carpet rolled out for him at the White House. Yet such hospitality was key to Biden's message. As the writer went on to say, it's one thing to pledge a peaceful transfer of power, but quite another to proceed as though this was a normal transition to a normal incoming president. I think many of us feel that in our bones. We know something is wrong here. We know who Donald Trump is. We know what he has done. We heard what he said about everyone from women to immigrants on the campaign trail. He is not an unknown quality, nor are the plans he and his enablers have for this country. Everything from mass layoffs of public servants so we can fill the federal government with people loyal only to him, to closing the Department of Education and removing vaccine mandates from our schools, all while his party allows insurance companies to deny everyone with pre-existing conditions coverage by removing the protections of the ACA. This is all terrifying. So this "it's all good, the people have spoken" thing, when the winner is a man who tried to illegally overturn the last election, let hundreds of thousands of Americans die due to negligence, who stole and potentially sold top secret documents from the White House, whose children and companies made billions of dollars off his presidency. This is the man who was indicted for over 90 felonies this year and has already been found guilty by a jury of his peers of 34. This is a man awaiting sentencing. Last time he was in power, he refused to concede and staged a riot to storm the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. This is a man who calls our country garbage and is a danger to women and the world order and the economy. So it feels wrong to just consider handing over the keys of the country to him, no questions asked. Now, I'm a big believer in our institutions, but I spent the past week trying to figure out how I stay alive without access to my medications without the ACA, or if there's a breakdown in their delivery. I grappled with how to talk to my 16-year-old son about the results. How do you raise a boy to be good in a world that rewards men for being bad? I felt blindsided by the idea that everything I had been taught about being a good person, about doing the right thing, about not lying, about having integrity was just bullshit. It shook me to my core to think the world was this broken, that everything I had taught my child about being kind and looking out for others had just blown up in my face. I found it jarring to be that disillusioned. Now, Harris was gracious and empathetic in her concession, and Tim Walz was kind and hopeful, and Joe Biden, who is the current president and the one who swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic, said it was a setback, and setbacks were unavoidable. But that didn't mean we should give up. Now, I don't know about you, but this whole thing feels like more than a setback. So that's a tough ask from the one person who actually has the power to protect our lives and our freedoms and the American way of life. Here we are with half the public terrified and confused, and our president appears to be dedicated to upholding the honor of the office of the president rather than acknowledging that the people who will be taking over that office are going to burn the entire institution to the ground. Now, I talk to a lot of people who seem to respond to the terror of our imminent destruction by taking solace in the idea that the people who chose Trump would also suffer. A common refrain in the days after the election were, "They didn't win, we all lost. They just don't know it yet." This week has felt like a year. It is confusing to know how the country is supposed to function with the idea that it doesn't matter if you're a criminal or a rapist or someone who publicly promises to hurt people. It doesn't matter because you can still become the president of the United States. It is a wonder how someone who ran a campaign of literal hate could be chosen by the majority of our fellow citizens to be our leader. And it is, quite frankly, demoralizing. Of course, it didn't help that the Christian nationalists and the Republican leaders started coming out almost immediately, vowing retribution against their enemies and full-throatedly admitting that after perpetually denying it during the campaign, Project 2025, the conservative blueprint to undo decades of progress on LGBTQ rights, reproductive freedoms, climate protections, and social inequality, wasn't just some random concepts from the Heritage Foundation, but their actual working agenda. I mean, I personally had multiple on-air fights on CNN leading up to the election with conservative operatives who swore up and down that liberals were just making up the Republican connection to Project 2025, that Trump had nothing to do with it, and it would have no bearing on his presidency. I had thousands of comments online from MAGA supporters telling me what a stupid, uninformed liar I was. And yet, as soon as Harris conceded, conservative commentator and Trump surrogate Matt Walsh tweeted out, "Now that the election is over, I think we can finally say that, yeah, actually, Project 2025 is the agenda. LOL." And there you have it. Former Trump advisor and podcast host Steve Bannon enthusiastically held up a copy of Project 2025 on his War Room podcast, calling it a conservative triumph that should be shared everywhere. And Republicans started openly embracing the project's punishing tone across the country. Look no further than Texas GOP official Beau French, who has continually been in hot water for using slurs against the gay and trans community, taking to social media on November 6th to say, "Can we just admit now that we're going to implement Project 2025? These people were just out here gloating that they had lied, that they were going to do exactly what we said they were going to do. And it was heartbreaking because we told you. And now it seems like we're stuck with this outrageous plan that will hurt so many people when they didn't even have the integrity to run on it." And speaking of lack of integrity, Donald Trump, the adjudicated rapist, who has been accused by 26 women of sexual assault or misconduct and bragged about overturning women's federal rights to their own health care and bodies, a man who continually referred to his female opponent as a low IQ individual, a bitch who slept her way to the top because she was dumb as a rock and then laughed with his supporters about her being a hooker, the man who closed his campaign by telling American women that he would protect them whether they wanted him to or not, was now the winner. And his victory seemed to unleash and free every incel and woman hater in America. Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist, misogynistic, xenophobic, anti-Semitic podcaster who had dined at Mar-a-Lago with Trump, went on air to say that the future for women was your body, my choice. In fact, the whole quote that got millions of views and hundreds of thousands of shares was,
"Men win again. And yes, we control your bodies. Hi, I'm your Republican congressman." Hi, I'm your Republican congressman. It's your body, my choice. And men, women again. Men win again. There will never, ever be a female president. Never. There will never be a female president, ever. It's over. Glass ceiling? Dude, it's a ceiling made of fucking bricks. You will never break it. Your stupid face keeps hitting the brick ceiling. We will keep you down forever. You will never control your own bodies. You will never be the president of the global empire. Never gonna happen, sweetie. Your body, our choice.
Never gonna happen, sweetie. Your body, my choice. Emboldened men who voted for Donald Trump at the highest rate in this country took the masks completely off this week and celebrated Harris's loss across the country by putting women in their place and attacking them online, repeating Fuentes' "your body, my choice" everywhere from X to middle school classrooms. They are out here calling us whores and cunts and threatening us with rape squads and saying things like, "We own you now." Their response only further proved what women have been saying all along, and that's that abortion rights were never about life and always about control. Control of women and their bodies. Women have already died thanks to the extreme abortion bans in red states. Hundreds of thousands of rape babies have been born against the will of the mother. And even if the Trump-Vance administration doesn't pass a federal ban, which seems very unlikely, the existing state-level laws have already damaged reproductive care across the country, with access to contraception and IVF now under threat. This toxic reaction of American men to Trump's win is its own problem. There is clearly a gigantic rise in extreme misogyny around the world. Social media has become a breeding ground for extremist behavior with little to no pushback. The online universe is now ruled over by the king of the thin-skinned bullies, Elon Musk, and is full of men, young and old, crowing about male dominance in a world where statistics tell us a far different story. Finally, After Trump closed his campaign with the violent imagery of enemies being punished, news networks losing their licenses, schools that didn't teach what he wanted losing their funding, and political enemies like Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad, many far-right supporters celebrated his victory by calling for more violence, saying Democrats are a terminal cancer on our country that has to be completely eradicated, and many calling for mass or public executions. As one supporter wrote, there has to be as many traitors executed as there are days in office. Build the gallows, restore the republic. And when those of us who see and hear all of this talk to Trump supporters, we're often met with gaslighting, that what we see isn't real, that what we're doing is just fear-mongering, that none of these terrible things the winning candidate, his followers, his supporters, his backers, and his allies have said are actually going to happen. But why wouldn't they? As this pod is being recorded, the Democrats are saying they still have a path to winning the House, but it looks far more likely that the Republicans will take that as well. So MAGA Republicans will have the Senate, the presidency, the Supreme Court, and apparently the mandate from the popular vote to do everything and anything they want. It's about as bad as it could get for anyone who believes in human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, and democracy. There is no doubt that Donald Trump plans to rule like an authoritarian, that he is in the pocket of people far smarter and more powerful than him, and that the people being chosen to lead alongside him will work to roll back as many of our civil liberties as they can, to build an America that looks the way they want and rewards the people they deem worthy. The smug entitlement of Republican operatives on display in the media this week tells us everything we need to know. These people are prepared, excited even, to take over the American government and install a president without a moral compass, who, thanks to the Supreme Court, has unchecked power. A man who admires dictators, sucks up to autocrats, and was caught on a hot mic saying that he wished his people would stand at attention for him the way the North Korean people have to do for their murderous dictator. On top of that, Donald Trump is surrounded by opportunists with extremist goals and sadistic tendencies, with very little concern for human life. If this man becomes our leader, Americans are going to have to find their grit really fast. Right now, we're kind of a soft people. We've been safe enough for long enough that we got complacent about living in democracy, with everything at our fingertips, where we could count on the protections of the rule of law and our civil rights and constitutionally protected freedoms. But those days might be over. And if they are, then we need to return to our roots. Our country's history is defined by resistance to tyranny. And sadly, since it doesn't appear we learned our lesson, or perhaps it's because we didn't include everyone in the land of the free the first time, we're going to have to learn this lesson again. If this happens, please understand it's going to be really bad. And while I sympathize with the desire to just double middle finger your way through the next 4 years, to just check out and say, fuck it, I did everything I could, let the people who chose this suffer, the thing is, it won't just be them that suffer. It's going to be all of us. And while I sympathize with the anger and disappointment of groups who feel like they've been absolutely abandoned, women, particularly Black women, the disabled community, the trans community, people like me with very serious diseases who might just die under a second Trump administration, even with all their federal power and their years of preparation, these people can't just accomplish everything they want overnight. You don't just flip a switch from democracy to autocracy, especially not in a country like America.